And in the meantime, I'll introduce myself quickly. I'm Mary Conquest, and I'm a content strategist. I work with Contextminds with Merrick, who is the other person you're seeing here. Sort of invented, discovered, was working on ontologies and different kinds of visualizations for his PhD. And through that, he created both context charting and Contextminds, which is a software that we're not really talking about today, but the development of the two are intertwined. So I'll be mentioning it a little bit. I'm going to get started. I think you can all see my screen. The agenda is on the screen and it's pretty simple. What is context charting? Why should I care? How do I do it? And what now? So first of all, I want to talk about that relationship between context charting and Contextminds. So context charting is a process that combines visual note-taking with research. It's an evolution of mind mapping in the context of the age of AI. So context charting is a process. Contextminds is a platform that Merrick has developed specifically for context charting. It's software. Today's focus is not on the software, it's on the process of context charting, because you don't actually need the software to do it. It's just that the two happened to develop kind of at the same time. So I'll demonstrate it on the platform, but I will explain along the way how you can do the same process with like paper and string if you want. It is technology agnostic. First of all, let's talk about why you would want to do context charting. So you already do research, you take notes, you look for relationships between concepts, and that's true across a lot of different jobs. Context charting kind of encompasses them all. It helps you capture ideas, fill information gaps and spot them, and organize your thinking. Contextminds as a software can go one step further and use the context chart as an AI prompt. But we're not really going to focus on that today. I mention it. The step is secondary. If we have time, I'll show it to you. But you can use context charting to come up with new ideas, to make decisions, learn new things, gather context, and create or plan content. Here are some problems that context charting helps. When your notes, links, and files are chaotic, I don't know if anyone else ever gets that way. You've got too many browser tabs open, you're context switching all the time, which you lose time context switching. If you are using AI in your search, sometimes the responses are too generic. Context charting helps with that. And you can come back to your notes all in one place later and remember what you were thinking and not forget what you were thinking. I just realized it says that you forget what you're thinking. Okay. I find that I can instantly see relationships between ideas visually in a way that I couldn't if I were taking linear, sort of traditional notes. So that's where it helps me the most. It also prevents me from forgetting where I saw a good article or source. It'll all be in one spot. So this slide explains a little bit more about how you're getting the benefits from context charting. So this is a little more abstract, but we'll come back to it. And in between, we'll actually make a context chart. So you get enhanced focus, and you get that through question-driven, like focused exploration. You improve your organization because you're using consistent categorization, which is different from many mind maps. You integrate knowledge better because you're connecting it to prior knowledge. You get a more comprehensive exploration through the expansion techniques, and then the systematic reduction brings you some clarity. So that's kind of the underpinning a little bit. This is what it looks like. It's actually quite simple. It's got 5 steps, and then here at the bottom is secondary, like it's something you can do if you want, but it's not actually part of the context charting process. We'll walk through each step, and I'm going to start with a simple example to illustrate the idea, but keep larger applications in mind, because context charting actually works in a lot of different scenarios. So here's the scenario that I'm using. I'm a freelance content writer. One of my clients is an environmental consulting firm. I need to plan a series of blog posts that will help people understand the benefits of hiring my client. So for this, I specifically chose something that I know a little bit about, but not a ton of it about. If I were to be given this assignment in real life, I would certainly have to do research in order to do it well. So step one is define. You need to know your goal and your focus question. And this is going to help you ground your work and keep it focused, especially in the final stages. So going down rabbit holes isn't necessarily bad for part of the process, but you will need parameters, and you're setting them now for step 5 when you're reducing. Again, my focus question here is, why should you hire an environmental consulting firm? And my goal is to plan a series of engaging 500-word blog posts. Now, you don't have to write down your goal. You can, if you think that this is something you may come back to months, years later, long enough to forget and want to know, like, why was I doing this in the first place? So you can understand the parameters of your thinking. Okay, I'm going to go into Contextminds and show you the very beginning of a context chart, which is simply that focus question. I've written it here. It's in the middle. Now, if you're not using Contextminds or any kind of software, you can literally just use a card and pieces of string later on. So you can do that anywhere. Yeah, or write it down in the center of your page, that sort of thing. So the next step is to categorize the items. So here's what that means. When you research, you get all kinds of information, and it's different types of information. So it might be a web article. It might be an abstract concept. It might be a question that you're trying to answer. A standard mind map doesn't distinguish between these types of information. In context charting, you decide at the outset what kinds of information you'll use. So in Contextminds, we call these item types. You can think of them with those words. You can think of them as categories. And they're predefined, again, in Contextminds. You can choose, we chose common ones that work for most situations, and you could use those, or you could choose your own depending on your goals. So you need to take a minute and decide about that. The purpose of doing this categorization is it does help you understand. It helps you organize your notes, but importantly, it also helps the machines understand. It helps AI or generative text and search understand the role of the item. So it gives more context to the queries. In Contextminds, you've got a search panel over here. And you see the predefined item types, which are topics, keywords, questions, headings, articles. These two are something else, and they come later on. They're relevant in the app, but they're not integral to the context charting process, so I'm not going to go into them. If you're working outside Contextminds, you could use these same categories or item types, but you might also want to use things like famous quotes. You could use reference formulae if that works, or geographical area or decision points. There's all kinds of different ways that you can categorize. So the next step is a brain dump. The chances are that you know something about the topic. In this case, I don't know a ton, but I can think of some questions that might be interesting and that some topics that the client might want me to address. So I'm going to add those. Now in here, I'm using this down here. Again, you could use cards, you could use stickies. You could do this in a different, like Miro, a different whiteboard type app. Okay, so for topic, I'm going to drag a topic here. And I know that legal consulting is something that environmental consultants do. So I'm going to add environmental regulations as a topic. I'm going to add a question here. How do environmental consultants mitigate your company's risk? So this is a question that I think the readers would want to know, because they're trying to figure out whether it's worth hiring this type of professional or not. Okay, and then keywords. This works well in the context of blogging, right? I'm going to add compliance. I'm going to add sustainability. And then I'm going to add a heading. This is a keyword. I'm going to drop down and make it heading. And this is, in this case, this is like a potential heading, either a title or just a heading within a piece. So the financial benefits. Okay. I don't yet know about articles yet. I don't know which articles I might want to use, so I'm going to wait for a minute and not add it. And that's it. This is a short brain dump. Obviously, if you know more, and in real life, I would know a little bit more, I would add more to the brain dump, but I don't want to keep you here all day. So the process would be the same outside Contextminds. The thing to remember is that as you're adding information, make sure that it is categorized within an item type. So if it's a question, it's a question. If it's a decision point, mark it as such. You can do that with colors. You can do that with all different kinds of methods. So this step helps you understand and organize your notes and contextualize any search that you do in the next step. So step 4 is expand. To be able to explore and capture the context of a topic, you need to research and add new information. And because you don't know what you don't know, you need to search during this time. So this step typically takes the longest of all of them. I would leave 30 minutes at a minimum to complete it. Of course, it depends what your use case is. So in Contextminds, you'd use the search panel for this. Outside of Contextminds, you can use all the tools that you normally use to search and do research. You might use GPT, search engine, that sort of thing. Again, remember to categorize information as you find it. So here in the search, there are suggestions being made. Let's go to articles, because I said I would come back to those. So what it's doing is searching articles on the web that are relevant. It's taking this information and using it as context for its search. So the more information you add here, the more precise the search will become. And if you're doing this outside of Contextminds, you're adding it to prompts if you're using GPT, for example. In this case, there are filters. I don't really want Reddit for this. I don't really want scientific articles either for this case, but you might in other cases. I'm going to just hit recent web articles. And here, this might be a good source for me. Okay. So in here, you can click plus, you can drag it over as I just sort of did. And you can go through, 5 reasons your business needs an environmental consultant might be a good one. But some of them might not, What down here we've got, what is consulting and what do consultants do? That's a little bit generic for what I'm trying to do. At this step, you need to be fairly open and non-judgmental as you're adding information. You get a chance to refine everything later. But, here I can search for questions. And again, there's filters. And the speed of this is the same. It's the speed of GPT, taking into account all of these pieces of information. So here we go. What are the primary services offered by? I'll add that. In what situations is it crucial? That might be a good one. Financial benefits, that's a different angle. I'll look at headings here as well. And as I'm adding information, I will start to see gaps of, I'll see like, oh, I've got a little bit about the financial stuff, but I don't know a lot about it. So I need to work more on that. And you can dig down a little bit by here. If I select just this is all that GPT is now taking into account. So if I'm doing this outside of Contextminds, it would be the difference between adding just this information into my prompt and adding some or all of the rest. So here's a good heading, understanding the ROI, long-term financial benefits, and that sort of thing. So you get the idea. I'm expanding. And at this point, I'm going to actually switch to a new map so that you don't, one where I've already done this expansion. And it will look like chaos, but don't worry. So the question we get the most often is, how do you know when you're done? And the answer goes back to your focus question, which I've put way at the top here. If you think that you have enough information to reach your goal, then you're done. And your goal, that's going to differ from a 300-page book to a 500-word article to trying to make a life decision or an organizational decision. So there's no set answer. It depends on the context. When you feel that you've finished adding new things, then it's time for the next step. And that is to reduce and organize a little bit. So now is the time when you become a little more discriminating about what information you need for your goal. So if you've written down your goal and you look at your focus question, you can go through and you'll see some things, either they're redundant, they're two items that are too similar, or they're just not going to fit well. Some people like to delete extraneous information. Some people just move it to the side so they can look at it later, just in case they want to go back to it. So I want to plan a series of blog posts, but I don't need to do all the research for every article now. I'm looking at it from the perspective of an entire series. So this is an overview that I can pitch. So I'm going to delete a few items and see. Okay, so I've got like top reasons to hire an environmental consulting firm and 5 reasons to. So I don't see that I need both. And I mean, you get the idea about deleting things. This is a good idea. Okay. This is also a little bit redundant. Okay, so imagine that I've gone through that whole thing and then I will organize. Now, organizing, there are a lot of different ways that you can do it. And again, it depends on your goals. So for this, I would use a simple hierarchical structure. So if I've got top reasons and I want to add risk assessment, in this case, I can drag it in and it's now a subset. compliance regulations, etc., permitting processes, that sort of thing. So that's a hierarchical one. You can also add links between items. In that case, adding a new item, but I can also like move the arrow and link two items, and I can label them. So you can, of course, you can do this. I could say like, if this requires this, or if it's an article, it's a source for this point. You can label it however you like. And again, you can use string, you can use any kind of technology to do this. And so there's that hierarchical organization. There's a narrative structure that you could do. You could do it thematically. It's really up to you. Just make sure that it's going to meet your goal. So now I'm going to switch to an organized map again, so we can speed up the demo. And here I've got something that is basically hierarchical and works for my brain. So I'm going to actually zoom in, but actually before I do, so here's my focus question. Here's a keyword that relates directly to that. And then I've got 1, 2, 3. Each column is a different potential blog post. So I can zoom in. And then at the left, I have some stuff that I think might be useful, but I'm not quite sure where to put it yet. So I've just put it to the side. What I can do at this point, this is what works for my brain. What I can do at this point is I can dive deeper. So for this one, for example, what I did was like a shift drag to select everything in, originally it was here, right? And so that changes the search parameters. Again, if you're prompting or searching, you would be manually changing those search parameters. And yeah, and that is now focused on everything in here. It's not taking into account anything else. So I can do a deeper dive on this if I decide it's now time to write this particular blog post and I want to fill it out a little bit more. I can see there's gaps. If there's only like 2 subtopics, that's not great. And in the end, I would end up something more like this. And that is context charting. That's kind of the whole thing. So now that you've seen an example, I'm going to come back to this slide because it makes more sense, I think, once you've seen the context chart. So your question-driven exploration, right? You've used that focus question at the beginning. You're using consistent categorization. So that improves organization for you, but very importantly, also for any kind of LLM technology that you're using, or you're kind of creating a knowledge graph. The connection to prior knowledge. So if I was using this to study, I might look at, in the brain dump, I put down what I already know, and then I can do searches and see, okay, I can anchor any new information to concepts that I already know, which has been proven in research to be helpful for learning. You get a more comprehensive exploration when you're getting suggestions, allowing you to expand. And then, of course, reducing, you're doing so systematically and you're getting clarity for your goal specifically. So if I had the same focus question and 2 different goals, my context maps might look different. Sometimes the process itself is the goal. If you've organized your thoughts, you've found gaps, you've added information, you've distilled items. For example, if you're trying to make a big decision, my daughter is going into university next year, and she's looking at different things to study, different potential careers, right? So I've actually got a context chart here that I'm going to go through with her. She's looking at maybe being a museum curator. So, what kind of salary is that? Where can she work in Canada? Or What kind of expectations can she have? What kind of program does she need to study? So I think we will use that. So that is if the process is the goal. Sometimes once you have the chart, you then use it for something further. So you can use it to study, you can use it to write, guide further AI prompts, you can share it if you're collaborating. And all those are true whether you use Contextminds or not. So here's something that you can take a step further if you do use Contextminds. And I think that you could do this without Contextminds. It would just be a little more labor. So I'll go back to my example. And where there's search, there's also over here a generate tab. So let's say, okay, I'm ready to write this blog post. Now, you can generate text from this as you can with any sort of GPT situation. As a writer, I would never do that. I would instead shift and select all of that. And here I would generate an outline. So it can help me, give me structuring ideas, but I'd like the writing to be my own. There's some predefined styles. This is similar to many other tools like Writer, that sort of thing. You can add points of view, audience, that sort of thing. And then I can generate an outline. And within that outline here, it's going to include the articles that I've used as sources and spots where I should perhaps use them. It looks like I haven't used any articles as sources, but anyway. So here's an outline that I can now look at. And for me, I would then copy and paste this into a doc and start working with it with my own process. And then there's two more things that I'll show you that are in Contextminds that I think you could also replicate outside of it. There are notes. So if I click on this, it's an article and it's going to show the link and the article. But if I also wanted to add my own note here, I can do that. And it will be associated only with this item. If I click on another item, I won't get that note. And then there are sticky notes, which are exactly what they sound like. If I'm working on this and I'm like, remember to pick up milk, something very simple, I can just add that. It doesn't have to be related and it won't affect, neither the notes here nor the sticky notes would affect the search. So again, who might take advantage of context charting? Students, researchers, writers, marketers, facilitators trying to guide group decisions like in a visual kind of way. And you'll see these little bubbles. Who else? It's because we're still exploring it. We're still exploring how this idea could be useful and for whom and that sort of thing. So we're still asking questions. And if you have any suggestions, we'd love to hear them. People use context charting for studying, researching, structuring outlines, planning campaigns, as I just did, or making decisions. Other than that, that's it. That's the process of context charting. You saw it in Contextminds, but I hope that you can sort of visualize it outside. And yeah, we think it's useful. We're really looking at organizational decision making right now, creating sort of a second brain knowledge base. So if that's all, I think we'll say goodbye. Have a great day wherever you are.